Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news coming out about Russia and also Ukraine. But by far our biggest piece of news of the day is we are getting word from the Russian side that they allege Ukraine is about to launch a second major invasion into the Kursk Oblast, which is mainland Russia, with about 20,000 men or so in the coming weeks or maybe even days. We're really not even sure just yet, and once again it is coming from the Russian side, so take it with a grain of salt, but that is currently the allegation being lobbed around, is Ukraine is about to launch a second invasion of Kursk very soon. Also, we've seen for the first time ever a very historic video showing the Ukrainians shoot down a Russian Mi-8 using a Sea Baby drone of sorts, and they launched a missile from it and took the helicopter right out of the sky and it crashed right into the water. And we have that to show you today for the first time ever. We also saw major partisan attacks happening around Moscow where 2 electric trains were destroyed thanks to partisan attacks right around the capital city of Russia. And also we have big news of a major oil depot attack around the area of mainland Russia as well. And finally, we have other big news that apparently secret Russian plans have leaked, showing war plans for invading Japan and also attacking South Korea. And it looks like they were planning a lot of civilian strikes based on those leaked war plans. And we have those to show to you today of the leaked war plans to actually attack South Korea and Japan by Russia. But jumping into our first post of the day, this one goes to PSO1. And like I mentioned, this is one of our biggest pieces of news of the day. We're hearing on Russian back channels that apparently they are reporting that Ukraine will attempt another invasion at the junction of Kursk and Belgorod with 20,000 soldiers in the next 7 days or so. And once again, just to show you the area which they're talking about invading here, this is the arrow showing you the Kursk Oblast of mainland Russia. There's Kharkiv inside of Ukraine, and there's Sumy. And allegedly, this is the attack vector they're going to take right back into Kursk to actually invade mainland Russia. Once again, this is an allegation coming from the Russians, so take it with a grain of salt. But we also have some more news right here from a Russian Telegram post, and it says by the 7th of January 2025, the enemy will strike at the junction of Kursk and Belgorod. Also, like we mentioned before, the enemy's amassed a first of up to 20,000 military personnel who arrived from training in the West, as well as those withdrawn from the DPR. And once again, take that with a grain of salt. But this is the current report of another Kursk invasion by Ukraine, and right now I'm not really sure if that is actually the case, and only time's going to tell if this is actually proven true. But with that, moving on to our next post here, this one goes to defense of Ukraine, and we did learn today that a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was taken out by Ukrainian defense forces, and here's a picture of that helicopter right now. That is the one that was taken out today, and of course there's nothing really spectacular about taking down one of these helicopters. It does happen quite often on the Russian side, but there is something very interesting about this. This helicopter was not taken down by conventional means. It was taken down by a naval drone of Ukraine, and this is the first time this has ever happened that an aircraft has been shot down in a war by a naval drone. And Ukraine's released footage showing its Magura V5 naval drone adapted to fire R-73 missiles, shooting down a Russian Mi-8 helicopter near the coast of Crimea. So let's take a look at the video and see the spectacular footage of the first time ever in history of a helicopter being taken down by a naval drone. And as you can see right here in the footage, there is the helicopter on the infrared right up there in the sky. There it is, right here, and it's flying around up there. It does not think it's in any danger because according to the Russians, the sea drones actually don't have the capability to shoot down aircraft. And right here you can see there's the helicopter actually firing at the drone right now, and there it is hovering right above head trying to take that drone out as we speak. And here is the Ukrainian drone actually targeting that helicopter using its onboard systems, and it just launched a missile right from the drone as you can see right there, and there it goes right toward the helicopter, and it looks like maybe the Russians were about to deploy some chaff, and it looks like they maybe did right there for a second, but it was not successful. The missile hit the helicopter, and there it goes right down toward the water, and we're about to see it crash right into the ocean, and there it went right there into the sea, and it totally crashed. And that was the first time ever in history that that happened, and that was spectacular to see. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to War Translated, and we get some more details from the Ukrainian intelligence chief Budanov about the destruction of the helicopter that we just watched. And we can see here, according to Budanov, the Magura V5 drones had previously attacked enemy air forces several times. However, back then the Russian equipment still managed to reach the shoreline, albeit damaged, and today for the first time ever that helicopter was shot down. It fell into the water, and thus the fact of the destruction of an aerial target over the Black Sea was recorded. So that is fancy language for it. This is the first time it's ever happened, and this is a feat. So once again, we get some more details from Budanov, Dimitrov, and that marks the end of our story about the Mi-8 going down. But moving into our next one here, we have another big story coming out of Moscow of some partisan attacks, and this one goes to Null Reports. And we can see right here in the post that in the Moscow suburbs, unknown arsonists set fire to 2 electric trains, according to Russian media, and the incidents occurred just hours apart, and they targeted the most critical part, the trains themselves. And while the train in the suburb of Moscow was self-extinguished quickly, the situation in Dimitrov was much worse, and the driver's cabin was completely destroyed, forcing the train out of service. So let's take a look at these major arson attacks on Russian trains around Moscow. Let's take a look at our first video. So right here in the video, we can actually see that there is a significant fire right here next to the trains, and this is not good for those Russians whatsoever, right next to these train services. And once again, it's happening in Moscow of all places, so that makes it even worse. It's right in the capital. So there's one video of it, but let's take a look at our second video and see the train really on fire. And there it is, the train itself actually on fire right down here in the train yard, and there it is burning. So apparently that was the cab of one of those trains right there, and it looks like that took that train completely out of service and destroyed it based on how bad this fire was. So it looks like the arsonist struck pretty damn good this time, at least on the Russian side of things. So there you go, another train attack right in the middle of Moscow. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to Geo Insider, and we also saw some more destruction across mainland Russia, this time at the Rosneft oil depot in Yartsevo in the Smolensk region, causing a fire at the facility due to a Ukrainian drone attack. And this post right here from Geo Insider says that residents in the area shared video of dozens of explosions beginning around 3 a.m. local time, and this is not the first reported incident involving drones at the Yartsevo oil depot, and a similar attack was reported on April the 24th of 2024. But as you can see right here, there is the oil depot right over here in the Smolensk area, and there it is highlighted in red, and we're about to take a look at our first video showing the explosion itself. So let's take a look. Alright, so taking a look at our first video here of the oil depot on fire. Out there in the distance, you can see it actually on fire, and for some reason they're having electrical problems here in Russia. I'm not sure if that's connected to it or not, or maybe it's just bad electrical equipment. I don't know, but they're having some problems here, and it looks like people are walking around right in the midst of it. But out in the distance, you could see that oil depot on fire right there. So let's take a look at our second video and see another angle of it in this one. So as we can see right here in the distance, there is a large fire right out there beyond the tree line, and that is the oil depot of Rosneft on fire and burning to the ground once again. There was also a large secondary explosion. You could hear that right there on the camera. So there you go. It's on fire once again, and once again, no Russian fire department to speak of. They're not out there yet again. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to OSINT Technical. And we've got yet even another video of the depot on fire itself, a more up-close video to show you how large it really was. So let's take a look at this one. And there you have it. That is literally the containers themselves on fire on the top. So those Ukrainian drones were very effective at taking this facility out, and there is more proof of it. But with that, folks, that is the end of our story about the oil depot. And we are moving on to our next big story here, and this one goes to Geo Insider. And this is certainly a bombshell piece of news right here. Apparently, secret Russian plans have leaked of a military attack on Japan and South Korea, according to the Financial Times. And the leak of secret military files from 2013 and 2014 shows that Russia has detailed plans in place to strike civilian infrastructure in the event of war, and the received plans indicate 160 targets for strikes, and 82 are military, and the rest of them are all civilian, which is very disturbing to hear. And in addition, the Russian Federation fears that the country's eastern borders will be unprotected in any war with NATO and vulnerable to attacks from the Americans and their regional allies, and the documents contain previously unknown details about the working principles of nuclear weapons, and also describe military simulation scenarios of a Chinese invasion and strikes deep into Europe. Also, it says here at the bottom that the Russian plans indicate an overconfidence in their missile systems, and a hypothetical mission against Japan or South Korea involved the use of 12 KH-101 missiles launched from a Tu-160 heavy bomber, and they document estimates about the probability of destroying about 85% of the targets. So very disturbing to hear. Once again, pretty much every country out there has plans to basically defend themselves, but it sounds like they were planning on striking a lot of civilian targets within these secret plans that were just released by accident from the Russian military. And this also goes to show you the lengths that Russia's going to make sure they can actually protect themselves against their quote-unquote allies, because it did describe a military simulation of a Chinese invasion and strikes deep into Europe. So that's very interesting, because I thought China was Russia's ally, but it sounds like that might not be as deep as we previously thought. So I don't know. That sounds to me kind of sketchy from coming from an ally, but but I'll let you be the judge of that. But as we can see right here, the Russians did have plans to strike Japan and South Korea, and that has leaked, and we've gotten those today. So very disturbing to see once again. And with that, we're moving on to our next post, which goes to the Euromaidan Press. And like we've been mentioning for quite some many months now, we really don't think that Russia is actually trying to pursue peace relations right now with Ukraine, and this is more proof of it. Coming from the Euromaidan Press, reported by the ISW, Russia's Lavrov, which is their foreign minister, reiterates the demand for Ukraine to surrender their sovereignty, and Russia's foreign minister reaffirmed Moscow's demand that negotiations cannot begin unless Ukraine relinquishes its sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this right here is definitive proof that Russia is not willing to negotiate. I think this pretty much closes the book on it. Negotiations are probably not going to be happening into 2025, at least according to Lavrov's statement right here, because Ukraine's already made it perfectly clear they are not willing to give in to these very, very unreasonable demands to end the war. And basically, Russia wants an unconditional surrender in order to even begin negotiating, which in itself is a slap in the face to Ukraine by Putin. So I would personally not entertain these whatsoever. It sounds to me like Russia is simply playing games now and rubbing it in Zelensky's face. So this is not a good sign for negotiations and pretty much closes the book, in my opinion, on the entire situation. But moving on to our next one here, this one goes to Inside Geopolitics. And we are going to switch gears just a little bit from our Ukraine-Russian news and move on to some news coming from the Asian region here. And from this post, we can see that in a New Year message, Chinese President Xi Jinping says no one can stop reunification with Taiwan. A very strong statement coming from Xi, indicating that once again he is still pursuing his potential invasion plans for basically invading Taiwan and quote-unquote reunifying it, or invading and taking it over by the Chinese mainland. So we can see here that Xi has not lit up on that whatsoever. It looks like he's still going full-fledged on his ideas, but for some reason they are on a temporary hold until Xi figures something out in the background that he's waiting to see. He's probably watching the way that the West is handling the Ukraine war, learning lessons from it, and then he might try to launch his invasion a little bit later after he's learned all he needs to know, or maybe perhaps they're building more military equipment in the background that they need to be able to properly defend themselves in the event of a Western intervention. We're really not sure, but it sounds like Xi is once again committed still to this idea. But with that, we are moving on to our next post here, which goes to Samuel Romani. In another piece of news about China, we can see that China vows to move hand in hand in cooperation with Russia in 2025. And I wonder if that leaked invasion plan, the Chinese invasion plan, might have any effect on Chinese-Russian relations. I personally doubt it, because we already know that China and Russia pretty much have a distrust of each other, even though they have a hand-in-hand cooperation partnership or a no-limits partnership. They basically don't trust each other whatsoever. So China is saying that they're moving forward with a hand-in-hand cooperation tactic, but in reality, they're simply making the best of an unfortunate situation where Russia and China have been forced together to basically rely on each other. So that is that, and once again, another report of China reaffirming that relationship. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to OSINT Defender, and we're getting some news this time out of Syria. So we're moving away from our Ukraine, Russia, and China news and on to Syria. And in our first post here from OSINT Defender, we can see that the first cargo ship is arriving in Syria since the fall of the Assad regime, and it arrived on Saturday at the port of Latakia. So we can see right here in the images, there is that vessel, the first ever since al-Assad got ran out of the country, and also Russia along with them. We can see right here that once again, trade seems to be reopening. I'm not sure what vessel that is or what type of goods are on board, but once again, they are reopening the ports to trade, so that way, of course, everybody can get their goods inside of Syria to keep surviving. So with that, we're moving on to our next post, which goes to War Translated. And of course, now that al-Assad is out, it looks like more than 1,500 people daily are returning to Syria from Turkey in the last 21 days since the fall of the Assad regime, according to the Minister of Internal Affairs of Syria. And currently, most are returning to Aleppo, from which people were forced to flee due to the bombings by Assad's army supported by Putin's militants. And as you can see right here in this video, which we're about to take a look at, tons of people are returning in mass. So let's take a look. And look at that, just scores and scores of people lining the roadways coming back from Turkey after they fled from al-Assad's brutal regime, and they're coming back to Syria, to the main big cities. And once again, that is crazy to see, a ton of people coming back in. That is a lot of people that actually fled from al-Assad and had to leave the country. So now they're able to return and quote-unquote reunify back with their families and other, of course, their friends as well. So we're seeing that right here, and there's the video which proves that indeed. But moving on to our last post of the day, this one one goes to OSINT Technical, and we have a very interesting image right here. OSINT Technical shows us that in the Eastern Mediterranean, a Portuguese Miko-class frigate, the NRP Alvarez Cabral, shadows a Russian large landing ship, Ivan Gren, as it heads towards Syria, and per NATO Maritime Command, we are watching. And as you can see right here, there is that vessel shadowing the Russian vessel, and this is what should happen pretty much everywhere around the world. Allies should be shadowing pretty much every Russian vessel, including the Shadow Fleet as well, to ensure that they are not up to anything suspicious, because once again, they are running around and doing very, very bad things with hybrid warfare, and they need to be watched very closely. So hopefully this happens more often, because it is a good thing to see. And with that, folks, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. So if you've enjoyed today's video, smash that like button, and also if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as well to keep up to date with the videos that we release pretty much every day at this point when there is news to cover. And also, be sure to check out our Patreon page. The link in the description below is for our Patreon, and you can go over there and sign up for a monthly membership and support the channel that way financially, which is of course a very big help because our channel is largely crowdfunded by you, the viewers, and it's you, the viewers, that make all this possible. And once again, big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for helping to keep the channel running. And with that, folks, hopefully we will be back to streaming soon. We really don't have an ETA on that just yet. The Enforcer is still getting over that cough even today, and we will have to get back with you on an update about how he's doing in maybe the next day or so. But with that, folks, thank you all for watching, and of course, bye-bye for now.